They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What do people call you, Pete?
Mr. Joshua.
What's your name?
Schreck.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
Look, there comes one of them now.
Hello, and welcome to another magical episode of Schreck Talk.
Well, that was quite an elegant intro there, Sarah Plainenthal. I really appreciate that. I was expecting a little more out of you. I'm quite disappointed, but that's okay. I mostly still love you anyway. Mostly. Welcome back. We're having an exciting episode tonight. We're going to be talking about something I think a lot of people are familiar with, and that's the Harry Potter series. Now, we're talking about the film franchise. We know there's the books. We know there's problems with the books. Once in a while, you might hear Sarah Plainenthal or myself make a reference to the books, but it's not going to be what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, you won't hear me making any reference to the books because I've never read any of them.
He's illiterate, so that's the way it works. But we're gonna go into them a little bit. We're not gonna spend too much time on each film. We're just gonna talk about some of the things we like, some of the things we don't like. We'd like to see improved a little bit. And so we're going to go off, and I think we just wanted to start with a little formed intro here, which is what we liked. One thing we stood out from each film. So we're just going to go through the films, all 8 of them. Yes, 8, even though there was only 7 books. We'll talk about that. But we're going to go through and mention what we like. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off and talk about the first Harry Potter film, which was actually the second film I saw. I'll tell you guys my story about how I came into Harry Potter later, but my memory that stands out most for me from the Harry Potter film was how ridiculous some of the plot points of the story were. And I can't believe I watch it and I buy into it like it's an actual real story and I'm supposed to love it. And I don't know why, but I do still.
All right, so from the Philosopher's Stone, as far as that goes, my favorite, most memorable part anyway, is going to be the part when they first arrive at the Hogwarts dining room or whatever, and Hermione and everybody is going in, and they're like, nearly headless Nicholas, I think it is.
That's actually not in the beginning of the scene when they first get there. That's actually later when, like, the next couple of days later.
Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless? That's my favorite moment in the first one.
Yeah, it's kind of a rather specific moment, I gotta say. That's a little unusual. What about you, Plainenthal? You gotta have a favorite moment from it. I've already gone. It's your turn to go. You can't shy away from it.
I guess it's just the general getting to know the little Potter and Hermione and Ron, and how you can see that they're going to be real good friends.
Yeah,
I know.
That was a winner right there.
Ooh.
Okay, so let's hope your second film's better. What do you got for Chamber of Secrets there?
No, you're gonna go first on. We're just gonna go around in a circle here.
Okay, we're gonna keep going around from the second one, which I'm actually quite a big fan of. My favorite scene in this would probably be, or I don't know, the most memorable thing from it for me would be how awesome Lockhart is. Everything with Lockhart in it is amazing. I love.
He is dreamy.
He is quite dreamy, and those, him in the duel and everything was just fantastic. He was hilarious. Can't go wrong with Kenneth Branagh. Mr. Shakespeare, Kenneth Branagh.
All right, and I got to go with another character that every time he was in the movie, I just thought was awesome and amazing, was Dobby. I love the character Dobby. I guess it has to do, with the voice. He's kind of, I don't know what it is. He's kind of that lovable kind of idiot kind of guy that you just enjoy.
He's got a great heart, and the voice was actually done by Toby Jones. Toby Jones, who you might know from a lot of different things.
My favorite part was probably the human chessboard, how they were part of the chess game.
I think you're mistaking
Oh,
the first
wrong
film for the second
movie.
film.
I
Well, we
always
just
get 'em
established
mixed
you're
up.
from the first.
Poop.
Aren't you the one who watched them most
I
recently
did
as
just
well?
watch them.
And man, you're messing up. This is going to be a rough one for us. So in the second film, which was about the Chamber of Secrets, hence the title, with the book of Slytherin, the heir of Slytherin, opening up the Chamber of Secrets and the giant snake and all those things. Do you recall this film at all? Anything in it? You are the worst guest star we have ever had on here, I must say. Okay. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to the third one here, which is The Prisoner of Azkaban, which is probably my least favorite of the films. We'll get to that again later. But the thing that stood out for me is just how different the feel of this movie was from the first two, and it changed the tone. It was the last movie I saw that I hadn't read the book before I saw the movie, and I think it's everyone loves it because it's so different. And that's what I hate about it.
Yeah, I didn't think this one was very good either. I put it really low on the totem pole. Maybe last, but maybe not. As far as this one, I mean, the whole movie, I've heard of people talk about how this was their favorite movie before the last couple came out, but there's nothing at all that really stands out in this movie. And I think a good 20, 30 minutes of the movie is just a rehashing where they go back in time and all that stuff. Don't really like Azkaban.
Yeah, Azkaban isn't that good. Do you actually have any thoughts on the third film? I mean, do you know what happens in this movie?
Yes, I do know what happens in this movie. Thank you very much.
Then what would you say is the standout?
I like that Harry has finally an adult figure that he knows and finds out that it's his godfather and has a parental person.
So the climax of the film where you discover
Yes.
the true nature of who Sirius is and what he has. Okay.
Yes.
That's not a bad moment. I think it's a little better than both of ours. The Goblet of Fire, which is the fourth film, my standout moment from this would probably be the girls fawning over Cedric Diggory. There's a scene where Cedric comes in, played by the handsome, I guess, Robert Pattinson. Also would be from, what's that movie called?
Oh, Edward.
I think that was
Twilight.
I think that was we'll go with Twilight here. Who played Cedric Diggory, and I think with the scene where they meet him for the first time, and the girls just kind of Ginny and Hermione share a look with each other. I think that it was just such an awkward, goofy, realistic moment that I liked it. What about you?
Yeah, and I have to say that like these two movies right in the middle are probably my two favorites, along with the second one. So I did really like Goblet of Fire, but I'm gonna have to go with most memorable moment is seeing Voldemort at the end, that battle out there in the cemetery. I thought that was pretty epic. Really enjoyed that movie, and it got me stoked for the next one.
Okay, Blaine Tollef, thoughts on Goblet?
I really liked the tent when the Weasleys and Harry and Hermione were all going to the Quidditch Cup, and how the tent looks so small, but when you go inside, it's like super huge. That was my favorite part.
Interesting choice. I gotta say,
I love
actually
Goblet
like
of Fire.
I'm surprised no one you did not mention the fact that David Tennant was in the movie.
Oh yes, and I love that part too.
Yeah, that he's in it. He's not as handsome, I would say, as he was in Doctor Who, but
Yeah, but he's the villain in the movie, so you can't necessarily like the
spoiler,
villain.
way to ruin it for No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, it's pretty apparent at this point. So the fifth movie, which I think is my favorite of the films, my standout moment for this, I think, is going to be the scene where they're training in Dumbledore's army, and you get to see all of the kids together learning. This is one of my favorite parts of the book. Hence, once in a while, I'm going to mention it very rarely. But I think this scene really shows them growing up and realizing that the world's bigger, and they have to start learning to take care of themselves a little bit. What's your thought over there, Schreck?
Oh, well, my thought easily on this one, Umbridge. The amazing Umbridge. She steals the show on this one.
Oh God, I hate her.
She totally steals the show on this one. In my opinion, she's the best part in the whole series. She's the villain that you love to hate, and that's what makes it so compelling and the movie so. But it puts it number one on my list.
Yeah, we'll go into Imelda Stanton's Oscar-worthy performance, I believe. We'll go into that later. What are your thoughts on? I think we already established how much you hate Umbridge. I really
dislike her.
I think that would stand out as, even though it's not a good moment, it's the most standout thing to that film when you watch it.
It is. Every time I she does a really good job of wanting to, you wanting to hurt her. And she's so nice about it.
That's what makes her such a wonderful character.
So evil.
I love that. That's why she's so complex. We'll get into that later. So for the sixth film, we're gonna go with the Half-Blood Prince. Which this one again, every once in a while I'm gonna have to do what I said. I hated this movie because of stuff that was put into it and the complete changing of the story in the movie. So that was my biggest issue with that. Was my most standout thing is how much it bothered me. I can't separate it because I did read the book beforehand. There was some things I liked about it in the movie. I might mention those later, but that was my standout.
And I have to say, for the sixth one, I mean, for the most part, the movie is kind of forgettable. I guess the part where, spoiler alert, Dumbledore dies. That's, I guess, the biggest moment to me. Don't worry.
I think we had a little annoyed reaction there. Come on, Plantel, sit up and say your piece.
I think he only is saying that because I told him that Dumbledore dies.
Maybe he forgot. As he said,
I did not forget that Dumbledore died in there. Not at all. It's just when I was thinking about it right now, that's the one scene that stood out in my mind the most. I was trying to think of other scenes, and all I could think about was Dumbledore dying.
Mm-hmm. And Snape killing him. That was the thing for me, was Snape killing Dumbledore right at the very end.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the seventh film, which should have been the last, but I agreed with the decision at the time to split it into two movies. The Deathly Hallows Part 1. I think the scene I liked most about in this movie, or whatever stood out the most for me in this movie, what I would say, is the way Hermione and Harry have really established their relationship. They know how close of friends they are. Even though Ron doesn't really understand this in this movie, you really feel that these two, honestly, most people agree, and eventually Rowling said it, they belong together. Those characters should have been together as a couple, and you really get to see how great their friendship is in this first part.
I totally disagree. I thought Hermione and Ron should have been together way more than Harry and Hermione. But as far as the seventh one goes, the Deathly Hallows Part 1, I found this movie totally underwhelming. The whole thing was like a bore fest. There's not one thing that sticks out in my mind in that movie except for maybe the very first scene in the beginning of the movie where they all, take the potion or whatever, and is it like, no, that's gillyweed. I was thinking that's
it's actually the second scene, because you get to see the Snape scene with Voldemort first. But you're looking for Polyjuice potion.
Polyjuice, yeah, where they all look alike, just like Harry or whatever. That's the scene that sticks out most in my mind.
Yeah, the Seven Potters, quite a classic scene. What about you?
Well, I agree. They should have both the book or the movie should have been split into two because there was way too much stuff going on in the books to get into one movie. So my favorite probably is when I think it was Charlie and Fleur are
Bill,
whichever. It's one of the Weasleys.
Bill and Fleur Delacour, who was from the fourth book.
Yeah, how when their wedding, and like that being the pivotal transitional moment where Harry and Hermione and Ron have to go off onto their own.
They've got to grow up. They have to grow up.
Really got to grow up, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what stood out from the first part. And I actually, in retrospect, like the first part more than the second part, because the second part's all action, and it culminates the finishing the story. I think the scene I like most from the end of that movie would be the end, just seeing them aged with the horrible makeup and the kids at the train and stuff like that. I think that is what stood out to me as the greatest part of it.
Yeah, I got to agree. That's my most memorable part from the Deathly Hallows Part 2 is definitely the ending. I've actually read the ending in the book. I just kind of fast forwarded and read
what
the
a
epilogue.
Loser!
So I read that part, and I guess that's the most memorable part.
All right, plan to tell final thoughts on the final movie.
That is cheating, reading the very end of the book. Reading the end of the book.
I read the first half of the first book. I was uninterested and wanted nothing to do with the rest of the series, but I wanted to see how it ended, so I read the very end of the last book.
My favorite part of the eighth movie, Part 2, was probably when Harry is talking with Professor Dumbledore after he's been quote unquote killed by
Was this
Voldemort.
I don't remember that scene in the movie. Was that in the movie?
Yeah,
I
it
guess
was in the
I
movie.
guess I forgot about that part.
Yeah, and how he can choose to live or to die, basically, to fight on, to kill Voldemort for sure.
Oh, I mistook what scene you were talking about. I apologize. All right, so there you go. We went in a little longer than I expected, but let's get into overall thoughts on the series. Harry Potter films, I think, it's quite a different series than something like the Lord of the Rings franchise, where it's very planned out ahead of time. The kids started with this when they were very little. We weren't sure how they were going to grow into actors. In some cases, there were some issues. In some cases, there were some really shining moments. Even, what's his name? Daniel Radcliffe has come out and said he kind of phoned in a couple of the movies, But I like the series as a whole. My biggest issue is that it doesn't feel like a fluid series. It doesn't flow as well as you would say like a Lord of the Rings, something that's planned out. It feels like this couple of them, they had to kind of pigeonhole them into the movie, and they didn't work as well. What did you think on the series as a whole? What's your thoughts?
I like the series. I'm not a big fantasy guy. I mean, I do like my share of fantasy, but it's not my forte. I really liked it. I thought it was definitely a fun kids movie. There's a lot of stuff about it I didn't like. Mainly I thought the third movie and the last two movies weren't very good. Sixth movie kind of right behind those as well. So there was some small, some bad parts in there. I really did like those two in the middle, Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix, and then Chamber of Secrets was pretty good too. It starts off as a good kids movie, and it kind of develops a little bit darker theme. Gets into the little, a more adult thing as the readers who have read the books have grown up, and I really do like that kind of aspect.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most beautiful parts about it is that the books aged as the kids grow up. The world life gets a little bit more real as you're growing up, and as the ages these kids were in the stories. And I think that's what stood out, made it so impactful to a lot of people. What did you think about the series as a whole? Just the film series as a whole, plain and tell.
I liked it. I liked that they kept the same actors and actresses for the main characters, and they didn't change it up so you weren't guessing who was what.
Yeah, originally that was what the plan. They had planned to change the actors after the first few films and add different new ones in so they could get them out quicker, but they decided to keep going with it.
Yeah, and I think it flowed really well because you could see the characters growing up and with the film.
With the most notable exception being Dumbledore, the original Dumbledore, Richard Harris.
That's Dumbledore. Or, excuse me, let's do our Lego reference. That's pronounced Dumbledore.
That he did die in the making of the movie, and they had to go with a different actor. But other than that, I mean, pretty much straight across the board. There was a different Voldemort early on before they did.
Before he was really cast,
Yeah.
it was a CGI, and you can't.
But other than that, it was pretty much straightforward.
Yeah, you can't really help Richard Harris dying. That happened. Michael Gambon was an adequate replacement, I suppose. I'm not actually a huge fan of Dumbledore's replacement, so
I liked him.
you thought it was good. Yeah, let's go into a few of the characters that we like real quick. Dumbledore. I thought Richard Harris was the perfect casting, and in the first two movies directed by Christopher Columbus, I thought that he was great. P&T, thoughts?
I liked both Dumbledores, to be honest, and it wasn't a big big change for me to get into the number 3 or the second Dumbledore with number 3.
What did you think about, do you have a preference on your Dumbledore? Which one do you like more?
Definitely Richard Harris. I mean, I love the actor. I think he's an amazing actor. I never read the books, so I didn't know. I know you have a real problem with him in the fourth one when he attacks Harry or whatever. He's like, "Did you put your name in the goblet?"
I think that was what was made Dumbledore. Yeah, that was my biggest issue with Michael Gambon, and that maybe that's just the writing. But Dumbledore was this overwhelmingly he was always calm. He always understood. He was always thoughtful. He was never rash and jumped to quick conclusions. He always he was this calming character, and that was my biggest issue. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like Richard Harris as an actor. I thought he pulled off a really kind of this mega powerful guy who's very very calm and relaxed and laid back. I thought he did a good job. I do like him better. Can you explain something to me, though? Since you guys have read the books, how is it that Snape was actually good? I don't remember.
So the reason Snape was good, this is why I think you need to watch the last two films again, because this is very important to the whole essence of who Snape was and his character, was because he was in love with Lily since they were children. They were best friends, and Lily always kind of believed in him until some events happened that led him astray. And he was always resentful of what had happened. He always loved her, so he did everything he could to protect Potter. But he switched sides before the fall, and he did everything he could to protect Lily. And by Potter, even though he hated Potter because he reflected James and how much he hated James, Harry's father, he loved Lily so much that protecting her son meant everything to him, and hence that's why he named the middle name of Harry's kid was Snape, because of how much he did.
I remember reading that when I read the epilogue when I shouldn't have. But I never understood that whole dynamic and everything like that, especially because he treated Harry kind of like crap in the first few movies. I never got that.
And that was also part of the story too, is that he was always trying to he was playing both sides. He was making sure he kept both personas going, where who he was, which was doing everything he could, but he really didn't like Harry. In all honesty, even though he cared for her to protect Harry, he didn't like who Harry was at all as a person.
And Sarah Plainenthal, what are your thoughts on Alan Rickman and his portrayal
Hello,
of Snape?
Alan. It's Alan.
Hello, Alan. I thought Alan Rickman did a very good job of playing Professor Snape. Just because in the books you get the feeling that Snape is very dry and mundane and doesn't have a whole bunch of like feelings, I guess.
I actually read a statement because once J.K. Rowling was wondering why everyone seemed to like Snape all of a sudden at one point, and she theorized that it wasn't Snape that everyone was in love with, but it was Alan Rickman, because Alan Rickman was actually a little bit more likable than the Snape in the book. So I think that's what made Alan Rickman so great for the part. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Alan Rickman's portrayal of Snape was really stand out, even though he had some issues. He was a great character. He gave it 3 dimensions, which is what a class actor does.
And one of the other characters that I really enjoyed in the series was Luna. Luna Lovegood. I thought her character was fabulous, and the girl played like this kind of weird, awkward girl who was in her own world, and it was completely normal.
Ivana Lynch nailed that character. She nailed that character. She was perfect cast. Luna, love her.
And then I wish they would have done more with the Horcrux, to be honest with you, kind of getting off the characters a little bit. You don't really hear too much. I mean, they're part of them, but I think it would have been, like there's the first movie and the second movie have to do with the Horcrux, right? No, just the second movie.
No, yeah, so the reason you don't hear about the Horcrux is because that's the mystery. They don't know, and that's what you find out in the 6th movie is they're trying to figure out, even though they've kind of changed it a little bit. In the movie, it sets up you don't know what the Horcrux. They don't know what a Horcrux is.
But then you only get a few of them in the first couple of movies, and then all of a sudden in the last movie they're like, we got to destroy all the other ones. I would have liked to have seen them destroying the ones that like Dumbledore got a hold of, or his hand turned to stone or whatever. All those ones.
But Dumbledore destroyed that one.
Yeah, and I would have liked to have seen more of the Horcrux, because I mean that's the kind of stuff that interests me. When it comes to, the fantasy stuff, is those kind of elements in the story.
See, and I thought, mentioning the Horcrux, I thought, the Deathly Hallows were a better thing, and I wish I had seen those more of a search for those in the movies than because that added more of that fantasy realm to it than just the Horcruxes, which you saw much more of than because obviously only the last book was called The Deathly Hallows. What did you think?
Well, I mean, the Horcruxes, that you needed to find them in order to kill Voldemort, and I guess that became more clear later in the movies. But the Deathly Hallows, they were once you knew what they were there. They were there at the very beginning.
Yeah, they've always been around. And that's maybe what it is. Each movie is almost like its own individual story. Even though they're part of this grander scheme, each movie really was its own individual, unique story. Would you all agree on that fact? So, P&T, what you thought, yeah?
Yes.
What do you think, Schreck?
For sure. They were all their own story, but they were the story of the coming-of-age story of Harry and his friends.
And a larger story, and you didn't get to see the bigger picture until near the end. That's what I think stands out, and that's why the movies, I feel, don't necessarily flow as well as something more planned out, because it is individualized. That's why they're all good individual movies.
See, and I think what they should have done is I would have liked to have seen there's 7 Horcruxes, 7 books, right? Have one for each movie, but you don't flesh it out until the last movie. You don't know what these are, these magical elements that are causing all this issue, like you didn't know in the second one with his journal. You didn't know that was a Horcrux.
Yes, but
And each movie could have had one of those, and it wasn't until the 6th movie that you find out what they actually are.
Well, I'm going to slightly disagree with that. Just because I think the idea of having such an overwhelming mission at the end, you've gone through all of this so far, and you come to the end, and you have so much to do. PT, what do you think? I think that this insurmountable odds is better than the long drawn out. What do you think?
Yeah.
Come on,
I don't know.
I'm putting you on the spot.
You are, and I don't. I can kind of see both sides. I understand. I think it's your thought process, how you, Schreck, how you figure out things and the way they go. That's why you like to have one for each movie. But really, when you read the books, and I'm coming back to the books, of course.
You got to apologize now.
It just
Do it.
makes
Say you're
more
sorry.
sense. Huh?
Say you're sorry.
I will not say I'm sorry.
You shouldn't. We're talking about the movie, so say you're sorry for mentioning the books.
I'm
so we can move on.
sorry.
Thank you. Continue.
I lost my train of thought. Thank you.
Okay. Well, so the issue is, I think they work better as this overwhelming odds. What do you think, Schreck? Obviously, you said you wanted it, but think about the perspective of how much you've worked for to get to this place where you think you have a chance, and you have this much more to go. That's amazing. It's like
but I still think that like Sarah Plain-Tall was saying about the way that way my mind works. I've written stories, and I constantly think about the storytelling process and stuff like that. And I think it would have been much more compelling in a fantasy storyline to have all these elements, and then the last one is the one that you're trying to find, the big, most important one, the last one to get rid of Voldemort. I think that still would have been insurmountable as well.
It does make sense, but I think that the viewers probably would have been tired by the 7th. They would have been like, oh well, they've got this whole little storyline going, and no matter what, even though it's about a completely different story, they've got the same characters, and they're looking for just a different Horcrux.
What he's saying is that you wouldn't know. They would all should still be as individualized as they are, but that you wouldn't know that it was all part of this one big thing going on and behind. Is that what? Am I correct in saying that's what you're
Yes,
thinking?
you wouldn't know until the end what these things were. You would just have a different magical element in each one of the stories.
So it'd be kind of like the Firebolt or the Philosopher's Stone was a Horcrux. The journal, which actually was. The Firebolt.
Well, the timepiece that they had that made them
the
go
time
back
turner. Just like the objects that they might get the cup, the goblet of fire itself.
Yeah, each one of those would be a Horcrux.
Yeah,
and in the process they would get destroyed or whatever, but you wouldn't know until the end that they were a Horcrux. It just in my mind, I need that clarity, that focus of vision.
So in reality, what you're looking for is a more a complete overhaul of the story.
Yes, it should have been like I know she the whole story came to her on the bus or whatever one year. A train. There we go. But it seemed like a lot of the details obviously weren't.
She filled in
out.
later. Yeah.
It would have been better. Like I've learned to, when I'm writing a story, to think about the entire story and how every little thing figures into it from the very beginning, and not just kind of like Stephen King or somebody just says, you just write and you just keep going, and whatever comes up, comes up. But when
the
you're
ending
doing,
will make itself eventually.
Yes, when you're doing a story that is 7 books long, you want to make it you want to have a very clear vision in your mind, where you start from, where you're going to go to, maybe not the exact wording, not every little minute detail, but have an exact idea in your mind of how you want everything to progress.
Yeah. So we're getting a little off subject. Let's move back to here. We're gonna finish up here in a second because we're running a little long. We've been rambling about Potter. I think we all like the Potter movies. We all love the Potter movies on some level or another. I think you need to watch Schreck. That you need to watch the last 3 again one more time. Give them another chance. They aren't as
Agreed.
They aren't great necessarily, but they're much better than you're gonna remember, I think.
Well, I have watched the 6th one at least 2 or 3 times. The 7th and the 8th ones. The 7th one, I watched that 1.5 times maybe. I was so bored out of my mind I didn't care, and I've only watched the 8th one in the theater once. And, taking them out of the school really kind of did me in. I mean, that was one of the things I enjoyed the most about it. I'll eventually give them another shot, but for now I'm sticking by my thoughts on them.
All right, final thoughts. Umbridge was the best part of the series. That's my final thought. Film franchise. Imelda Stanton, best performance, best thing that stands out. Schreck, go.
Agreed. Umbridge I wish there would have been more Umbridge, but I also liked...
Another reason to watch the 7th movie.
I know she's in the 7th movie. I just watched that scene the other day when Plain and Tall was going through them. I really like Umbridge. I wish the story would have been a little bit more cohesive from the beginning. I can understand why it wasn't, but I did enjoy the series. I like them. I can still throw in quite a few of them and watch them over and over again, especially those ones that I had mentioned earlier. Sarah, Plain and Tall, what are your thoughts?
I really hate Umbridge.
So that's your biggest thought on the Harry Potter film franchise?
No. The Order of the Phoenix, I wish they would have divulged a little more information, a little more backstory on the characters that you saw little snippets of and were wondering who they were, having no idea who they were.
All right, I guess that's an unusual final thought for it. So,
well, let's go through, and on the spot here, just whatever you can think. Don't take any time. I want you to order the movies from worst to best.
Worst to best? 3, 8, 6, 7. No, 3, 8, 6, 1, 7. 4, 2, 5.
All right, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to go with my worst is going to be Deathly Hallows Part 1. My next worst is going to be Prisoner of Azkaban. Then Deathly Hallows Part 2. Then I'm going to go the Half-Blood Prince. After that, I'm going to go back to the Philosopher's Sorcerer's Stone, the first one. Then I'm going to go with Goblet of Fire, Chamber of Secrets, and finish it off with the best one being the Order of the Phoenix, of course.
All right, Plain and Tall.
Okay. Hopefully I can get them in the right order here. My least favorite is, I guess, 3, Prisoner of Azkaban. And then 1. And then 2. Yeah, I didn't really like the very beginning.
No Chris Columbus love. Okay, continue.
I like Chris Columbus,
Continue.
But anyhow. Okay. And then we're going to go Deathly Hallows Part 1. And then Half-Blood Prince. And then we'll go Deathly Hallows Part 2. Part 2. And then we'll go Order of the Phoenix, and then Goblet of Fire.
Goblet of Fire lover. All right, folks. So there's our thoughts on the boyhood of fantasy films. So, we rambled a little bit. Hopefully it wasn't too annoying.
Go away or I shall taunt you a second time.